Hey creative friends, it's Tracy Bautista and I am going to take you on a little creative journey with me today. So in May, I started a daily creative practice that I was making patterns. Mainly on my iPad. I did a little bit of sketching, a little bit of painting on the iPad, but then also doing a lot of pattern work for my surface design portfolio. In June, I started a daily sketch practice, and I actually am going to sketch with some watercolor, I think maybe, and also with some other different pens that I have. And so I just have a bunch of supplies here. So I thought that I would, let's just move these really quick. I'm going to take you through some of the stuff that I've been doing. So I have been doing this project daily, and spending anywhere from 5 minutes to 10 minutes, most of the time at least half an hour. And I have been working for June, I've been working in a journal, a little sketchbook, and on my iPad, like right here. And then also inside this mixed media pad. So I thought I would just share a few things. Let me see if I can go, it's a little too close. So inside the iPad, I have been doing a few fun projects. So in May, I worked on a pattern a day or some Procreate brushes. So I worked in both Procreate and Illustrator and started to experiment with some of my motifs and mark making. These were hand painted motifs that I scanned in and then used them for patterns. Then I did some hand drawn ones, a lot of just different like backgrounds, and turning some of my original Procreate paintings, like this one, into some repeat patterns. This one, it's got a bunch of layers on, so you're actually seeing multiple pieces in there, so you can't see the whole pattern by itself. But I just kind of gave myself the permission to play and to experiment, and this one was fun. I created this pattern in both Photoshop, or in Procreate and in Photoshop. I did some work, and then I really love how that one turned out there. So that was May. I did a bunch of work in there. And I also did a bunch of work inside of Illustrator, so on the iPad. And I created a series of surface pattern designs for my portfolio, and it was a lot of fun playing with the Illustrator on the iPad. So here are some of the pieces that I created. And so I went and worked with both Procreate and Illustrator, and a lot of these motifs were either scanned or some of the original motifs were created in either painted and then cleaned up in Procreate, and then I imported them right into Illustrator on the iPad. Some of them I took from previous paintings, like this one here. It's a bunch of ovals. I created a Procreate brush set out of these ovals a couple years ago, but I decided to turn them into patterns also. Some of these files are really large and might take a little bit of time to open. That one seems like it's stuck for some reason. Let's see if some of these other ones will open. I think the file sizes are just really large. That could be why. I may have to restart my iPad. There we go. Some of them are so temperamental. So on this one, let's see if you can see. These are hand painted, most of these. Some of them were also created inside of Procreate, and then I cleaned them up in Procreate and then brought them into Illustrator to vectorize them. So that was a lot of what I did during May, where I created all of these different surface pattern designs, things that I am going to turn into fabrics and create some samples for my surface pattern design portfolio. So that brings me to June, and I have been doing a daily sketch project, and a lot of the work that I'm doing is twofold. One is to commit to doing artwork daily, and I'm doing a mix of both traditional sketching in a sketchbook and also digital sketching. So I'm trying to do a Procreate canvas at least a few times a week. And I am doing a whole collection that I'm working on called Wild Blooms. I started making a paint collection month and a half ago with the same theme. And many of the photographs that I'm using for this collection are from a trip that I took to Monet's garden in Giverny, France. And so you see the reference photo here. Each one of these, I've spent some time just creating some fun sketches and motifs, playing with different brushes, sometimes in black and white, sometimes using the color of the photo to create my sketches. So lots of different floral shapes and different pieces that I can then take into my pattern design portfolio. I'm also creating a whole set of patterns with this theme and a collection of painted work that has this theme. So a lot of the sketches, while I am not trying to recreate the photo, they're really helping train my hand and also play with a variety of brushes. Some of these brushes are the native Procreate brushes. Some of them are brushes that I created, like this watercolor brush right here. That's a custom brush I created. There's a pencil that I created that's right there. And this swatch brush I created, which is my own custom Tracy Bautista color brush. So you see all of the different marks that you can make, and each one of these photos is from that trip. And so this season, all of my work that I'm doing is based on the Wild Blooms theme. And so inside of my play community, this is what we focus on. And the idea is for you to create your own work in your own style, in your own terms, not copying my work, not copying anybody else's work. This is another start. This was for today's. So I'm working on this, using this photo as my reference. And you can see I'm playing with this is a watercolor brush I designed, but I'm really just playing with how do I create this shape and this mark with different types of digital brushes. And then bringing that whole idea into the sketchbook, where I use black pen. Right now I've been using black pens, and I started working with, this was yesterday. Yesterday I only spent about probably 5-7 minutes sketching. I didn't have a lot of time. I was really busy. So some days I spend a couple of hours. Like on a Sunday, I actually just I drew and painted for 2 or 3 hours just to kind of decompress. So these are some of the things that I've been doing in this particular sketchbook. So my idea is to fill this up with marks that are all inspired by the photos that I took at Monet's garden. So if you've been around my work for a while, you know, and my paint collections, you know that I love to work and create work that's based on a theme or a story, and many of them are based on places that I've traveled. So while I was there at the garden, these are some of the, just one of the albums, some of the photos that I captured. I'm trying to find one with the boat and the lily pads, like here. It was just so peaceful and beautiful. There's so much greenery, so much foliage, lots of florals, so much inspiration. So I'm taking all of these and just using them as my guide as I draw and paint. Let me see if I can find the photo that I did of the spider flower. It's somewhere in here. Here it is. So this is beautiful. It was the inspiration for this page right here. And I just used a couple of different pens to do that work in there. And I have a bunch of different black pens that I like to work with. Recently, I've been playing with the Kiritake Bimoji. I think it's their Bimoji pens. Most of the, no, not those, but all of this work is are these two pens. It's the, yeah, Bimoji pen. It's a brush pen, and they come in like 5 different brush sizes, I think. My favorite is this brush medium. It's got a really loose feel to it. But then I also really enjoy painting with the Sakura pens too. So a lot of times I will use these, and I have we'll just do a little tiny bit. So I'm just using, like I said, I'm not trying to make this like perfect, like exact. I'm using the photo just to really kind of inspire the mark making that I'm doing. Whether or not it looks like the exact thing, I'm not too concerned about it. I just want to kind of get that idea going in the marks that I'm making. So it's a great way to kind of practice and to get your hand kind of moving. I try to not overlap them right now because some of these I want to scan and use for some pattern work. So they all are separate motifs. I'm not trying to design like a whole garden or anything like that. On some of these other pages I might, but right now I'm just kind of playing with the different shapes to create some really interesting pieces that I can use later. So I'll take some of these and just keep using different pieces of the flowers to then make some marks. And depending on the pen that you choose, sometimes the pen is going to dictate the actual size of the petals. Like this is going to get too close to that, but what I'm doing is I'm pressing really hard and then letting up so that I get like a thick line, and then I'm just kind of crossing over and rolling it to get like a thinner line. So you could do this also with a brush, and I'm going to do a little bit of painting like that next. Let me put this on the screen. Let's move it there. Sometimes with these brush pens you have to be a little bit mindful because you see how it starts to bend. So I'm pretty rough on my brushes. I just have a really heavy hand, so if you don't want your brushes to, if you want them to last longer, definitely don't press as hard as I do. That's how I normally work, so. And some of these, like if it ends up looking kind of wonky, when I go back and if I want to use this when I am digitally painting, I can actually go in and clean up a lot of that. So really, I'm not worried if things, you know, are not really going the way that I want, because I am just wanting to make some really quick, fast marks. So sometimes, like, I love to be able to zoom in, so that's why I'm looking at this on my iPad, or sometimes I use my phone too, but this gives me a good indicator of like the shapes, so I can really look in, because that's really small. If I was to put that down, you see it's barely like a little piece, but if I can zoom in, then I can kind of get into that and then make some larger marks. So it's all about training your eye. So I love using a brush pen because it fills it in like a brush, like you're using an actual paintbrush. But you could use a skinnier brush or a skinnier pen and work with like the outline only. But you'll notice most of what I did in here, because it's a brush pen, I'm using it like more like a paintbrush, more so than like a pencil where I would use an outline. So this is a thinner, which one? This is the medium. I don't think I brought a fine tip one. Yeah, so here, if I did more of like an outline, I could do that. And let's put this underneath. I think I want a skinnier pen. This one's a little bit skinnier. So I've got this right here, and I could just use this as a little piece just to outline some of the petals that way. So that's another way you can kind of work with your pictures, playing with the line versus the actual shape, the outside shape of the flower. And again, like I said, I am not trying to make anything really perfect. I'm just I'm holding the pen really, really lightly. And then just making some other random marks. So you can go and paint or draw as fast or as slow as you want. I just realized I missed kind of like some smaller petals that were in the center of that. Again, then I could come in if I didn't, if I wanted to kind of do this again and practice it again, I could do that. But right now, really I'm trying to just kind of practice and sketch. And my sketchbooks, I never recreate things exactly. A lot of times what I end up doing is taking these motifs and sketches and then turning them into patterns. But if I'm going to paint this, I'm not trying to recreate the thing. That's just not how I work in my sketchbook. My sketchbook is really all about play and experimentation. There's not a lot of trying to paint this exactly or trying to make something look exactly like it does in the photograph. Really, I'm just using it for the different shapes and creating some really interesting and fast mark making. So you can work as slow or as fast with your you can't see that, with your tools. Let's bring this up a little bit. There we go. And I'll always say, you know, just experiment with pen, because even though you can't erase it, it doesn't matter. You know, you can go back and it's a fun way to really start trusting yourself when you're making marks. I rarely draw with a pencil that I'm going to trace over. That's just not how my style is. So I'm just used to doing this, and I know not everybody is, but the more that you work like this, the easier it gets. Like, that doesn't look exactly like that flower, but you kind of get the idea of it. And that one's definitely not my favorite out of all of these, but it's a good way to train myself. And it's also sometimes difficult to do this while you're trying to talk through a lesson. So I just encourage you to grab a photo that you have and start to make some really quick marks with different pens. I really love working with brush pens. I have some different ones here. There's some, I think this is Pentel. This is one of Jane Davenport's. I've got another Fude. This one's a Tombow. I love this pen just for writing because it's got that pointy nib also, but it's got, this one is definitely for like smaller. I use this for actually writing, not so much sketching, but you can see it's good. It's great for like smaller. Indy. Do you see something outside? So that's the one thing I love about working with these kind of Fude brush nibs. You can get really skinny pinpoint marks, and then you can also get really thick marks too. But then I could use a bigger brush. Which one is this one, the big one? I think it's this one, maybe. No, it's this one. And maybe I want to do something here, which, let's see, is this off of the table? Kind of, let's see. There we go. So, what was I looking at? I was looking at just something quick, and the reason I love this one is because you really get that like brush sense, like a paintbrush with this one. The one thing I found that I need to do every so often though is to get it back to its like pointy shape. So I just roll it. So I get back to that brush, that pointy brush. So you can really see the difference in the type of brush. Really loose, kind of brush, and then the Pigma brush. You can get more of a detailed line when you use it. So if I use this to kind of do that same thing, you'll notice it's not as kind of brush like, but I can get some similar marks. This one's definitely a thinner. That's the medium. If I use the bold, which is a little bit thick, a little bit bigger, you notice, I can press really hard like that, and then really light to get that edge. So really hard to really light. And then use the tip to add a little bit of detail in there. So those are some of the things I do during my daily creative practice, using these photos to inspire my mark making. So what I normally also do is at the bottom here, just write the date, and then can't really see it down there. And change my pen really quick. These are dahlias. Sometimes I'll write around the edges and write, random sayings or so have fun and enjoy working in your sketchbooks or journals, and try to commit to that daily creative play. I can't wait to see what you create. I'll see you soon.